Hello, everybody. We have a few, I'll leave it a few minutes. We've got various people joining the webinar now, but we will start shortly. We have a few more people joining us, but I will start the introductions now, and hopefully everybody will have joined us by the time that Sarah kicks off. Welcome to this IABSE webinar. It's fantastic to see so many of you joining to listen. My name is David Knight. I'm the chair of the IABSE British Group, and today I'm delighted that Sarah Bygent from Price& Myers has joined us to talk about Manor Lodge School. And before Sarah gets going, there are a few notices and adverts for future events that I'd like to share with you. Firstly, the IABSE conferences in both Copenhagen and Incheon, so Copenhagen in Denmark and Incheon in Korea, are open for to book tickets. The tickets in Copenhagen has been extended by a few weeks, so please do book your tickets for that event. That is at the end of April, and then Incheon in Korea in September. The final papers. Are being submitted at the minute, the full papers, and that date has been extended by a month. So your papers will need to be in by the 15th of April now. Hopefully that gives people a bit more time. In the UK, we've got some really exciting events coming up over the next few months. I'd encourage you to take a look at our website at what's planned. But the most pressing event is something called Future of Design, which will be happening in Cambridge on the 24th of April. Future of Design is aimed at early career designers, architects, engineers, and researchers. And it's a really packed day of inspiring talks from industry, but also some presentations from early career participants as well. So I would encourage you to come along to that. Um, Following on from that, our next big event is the annual lecture, which this year will be given by Lucas Epp from Structurecraft. That will be in May at iStructy headquarters in London. Both of those are well worth taking note of and joining us for. The final thing to advertise is the IABSE Awards. The deadline for submission is coming up fast, 31st of March for those. So please do consider submitting your projects. I think the completion dates need to be in the last 2 years. Consider submitting those to the various categories, and those will be judged and awarded prizes if appropriate. Um, I'm really delighted that Sarah has joined us. Sarah is an engineer, as I said, at Price& Myers, and she was the winning submission in the IFC British Group Nethercott Prize. The Nethercott Prize is awarded for a paper written by an early career designer or engineer. Um, Around a project that they have been involved in, and the emphasis in the competition is on the ability to tell a story and to critically interrogate the work that they do, and aiming to really promote skills in written communication within the industry. And it's always a fascinating competition to judge, and we were really impressed by Sarah's submission. So Janelle has the opportunity to present that to a wider audience in the form of a webinar, but we're really looking forward to it. So I'll hand over to you now, Sarah, and yeah, look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, David. I'll just share my presentation. I'm not as we're a Teams company rather than Zoom, so I'm not as versed, but hopefully all works. As David said, I'm Sarah, structural engineer at Price and Myers. We're going to talk about a small project I worked on at a school, Manor Lodge School in Radlett, which was the topic of my Nethercott Prize essay last year. I probably won't use the full 45 minutes since it's a relatively small project, but I have lots of pretty pictures, so hopefully that keeps interest going. So first, do a bit of background about the school. Manor Lodge School is an independent prep school to the north of London. So if you're driving, it's just past junction 23 on the M25, or I usually took a short taxi from Potters Bar Station. As you can see from the aerial view, it's surrounded by greenery and open fields. And I've just pulled from their website this ethos or a section about their philosophies at the school. One of the key ones was this idea of blending outdoor and indoor learning. And that ethos was really central to our project. Here's a closer overview of the school site. The main entrance is over here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. Just adjacent to the nursery. You have to be quite careful with your timings of arriving to site because it could get quite clogged up, this small road, with all of the parents driving in with their kids. From the main entrance, there's a large car park, and then there's the Grade 2 listed Manor House and the adjacent Coach House. To the side, there's a smaller access road that comes down to the grounds shed and the staff car park. And during the works, we used that grounds shed as the site compound and offices, and that road was used for site access. There's a few ancillary buildings. The Basil Flashman building, which is actually a current project in our team. They're doing some amendments to that, which houses the sports hall in the sixth form. But our project was just this little one at the back, a reception year's extension. Some key details about the project. As mentioned, there's 2 Grade 2 listed buildings on site, and we had some alterations proposed to these, and we need to go through listed building consent to do those. On top of this, we had a very tight program, which meant that a lot of the works would have to be carried out while the school was in session. This meant that site traffic, deliveries, removals, noisy works, it all had to be very carefully coordinated with the school. Lifebuild, who were the contractor, actually did a regular newsletter to the parents, which kept them informed of the construction process and tried to nip any of those potential complaints or issues in the bud. Also, as we were tying into and amending existing structures, we'd be working with a series of unknowns. This is an active school site, and it was difficult for us to get on site and do intrusive investigative works before the contractor got on board, so we had to be very agile to site discoveries. Quick run through of the project team. Architect was IID, structures and civils were both carried out by us. Mechanical was Alden, electrical, Dark and Taylor. QS was Madeline, and as I said, the contractor was Lifebuild Solutions. We had one previous project at the school, which was completed in 2022, which was the infill of the courtyard to the listed Coach House, which was also with IID Architects. You can see there's a lovely staircase and various timber exposed. It's quite a nice building once you're in. Let's start with the existing building. A couple of internal and external views of the existing conservatory, which was built in 2007. School had a number of issues with this building. It's essentially just a conservatory. There's no thermal regulation. It was too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter. It didn't have any specific M&E, so it was fully reliant on natural ventilation. So the windows and doors had to be open even in the colder months if it was in use. It's long and narrow, so restricted play area and could only be used by one group at a time. And despite it being fully glazed, it actually didn't really bring a lot of light into the existing classrooms. No storage, and there's no really feeling of link between the inside and the outside. It's just a small conservatory. The existing playground was also fully paved and largely uninspiring to the kids. Uneven paving surface, and yeah, it was directly against that kind of indoor-outdoor external play that they were really keen on in the school. So that was going to be formed part of the works as well. Onto the proposed project. These are a couple of CGIs and inspiration photos from IID's initial presentation, which was in January 2023. They had these really strong ideas of big glazed facades and this curved flowing roof profile to help blur the lines between the inside and the outside of the new extension, including a cutout in the roof to house a tree. Initially, there were plans for a green roof, but these were VE'd out, thankfully, as that would have caused problems with all the timber we wanted to propose for it. Landscaping also had a major overhaul with a focus on softening the surfaces and bringing in more natural playground ideas, as you can see by the sort of log inspiration photos. This was part of a broader program of work, so this was phase 2 of a 5-phase plan. The key element was the early years extension. Other works involved new openings to improve circulation and the feel of the spaces inside, because it's a lot of corridors and rooms. There was also an infill to an unused staircase and some minor demo works for, the aim was to propose a new refreshed staff area. But I'm not really going to focus on those because they weren't as interesting structurally. But I'm told the spaces were really nice and the staff are very happy with them. We had some archive information on the existing structure of the conservatory, including these sketches and the calculation pack that was associated with them. But as usual, there was no final stamped construction drawings. So we were aware that we couldn't really rely on these to be true, but it gave us a bit of a starting point. As I mentioned, we weren't going to be able to confirm any assumptions we had until the contractor got to site. So really the only thing we were proposing to reuse would be the foundations, since the whole conservatory was going to be demolished. And this gave us a good idea of at least the depth they would be and what we might expect to find. The ground conditions were pretty poor. We had around 1 meter average of made ground, which varied a bit more, a bit less in certain areas. And there was soft clay directly beneath this, which gradually increased in stiffness. Coupled with the clay, the site being nature forward, had trees left, right and centre. Very happily for us, directly adjacent to our proposed building was a rather large collection of oak trees, which is never very good if you're doing foundations in clay. All this to say, we knew we'd need deep foundations. This being a single-story building, foundations are usually 30 to 40% of the embodied carbon, and deep ones would only increase that further, so we knew we definitely wanted to look at reusing those existing foundations where possible. The project, though small, had some fun technical challenges. Both us and IID had the aspiration to use timber where possible, but the cantilevering overhanging roof was going to make that quite difficult if they wanted it really thin and slicing through the air. The glazed facades and the big openings to the classroom behind meant that we didn't have many closed walls for bracing, and exposed bracing through the windows wasn't really possible. So moment connections were going to be required, some kind of portalized frame, and in timber those moment connections were going to drive up the size even more, so we ended up using a combination of steel and timber in the frame. I've already mentioned the other 3 issues, the key ones being the active school site and the deep foundations required to meet NHBC standards for building in shrinkable soils. So we'll look at how we tackled those. One of the key things that we were keen on embedding was low carbon thinking in the project from an early stage. It's very easy to lock yourself out of potential savings later by committing to headrooms and head heights and external envelopes before you've really studied the depth required for the lower carbon solutions. In this case, we were looking at 3 options, being steel, flitch, and fully timber. We worked with the architect to see where we could set deeper structural areas and allow for these more sustainable beams. Interestingly enough, you might note that there's not that much saving between the steel beam and the flitch option, but it did allow for a slight saving. Every little helps, and also helped with giving that sort of warmer and natural interior while still allowing the structure to be exposed. So you do get savings in finishes and the ceiling, etc., which aren't really captured in that structural note. We also designed the foundation scheme to reuse the existing deep foundations, helping reduce our impact further. There's a lot of funky angles and levels to work with, so it took a lot of sketching and resketching from my end to work out how all the pieces would fit together. We then worked these through with the architects to discuss how exactly we wanted those exposed connections to look and how this was interacted with the proposed details. Workshops like this were really valuable and helped us work as a team to solve the solutions rather than individually trying to piece our elements together. You can tell these were quite early sketches because I was still writing in lowercase, and I've since adopted the engineer's capitals only for all sketches approach. But these are quite nice, I thought. This was one of the first jobs on site where I'd done the full scheme from stage 2 to stage 4, and it was really exciting to watch it all go up. Seeing how my hand sketches and our formal drawings translated to a physical structure is something I've always found really rewarding. It was also, I suppose this was a nice day to visit site. It's slightly less fun when it was slashing with rain and you're trying to convince the contractor you can see all you need to see from under shelter. And then it takes you about 2 weeks to clean the clay off your boots. So, but yeah, it looked really nice. Lifebuoy had a nice site put together. As with any job working with existing buildings, we had some interesting site discoveries. One of which was that the existing foundations were actually brick and not mass concrete, and also that the beam and block was spanning a completely different way to what we expected it to. This was one of those moments where you have to be ready on site, and I walked to a corner, sketched something, sent a picture to the associate I was working with, and gave him a call. And he said, "Yep, sounds good." Contractor took a photo, and they built it within about 3 days, which was kind of scary but quite exciting. The openings in the main house also gave us a bit of fun, since it was brick infill stud work rather than full brick. So we had to slightly adjust where the opening was and how we tied into the existing wall. Since the journey to site was quite long, I often found myself invited to look at other defects across the site. One of them was relatively simple, a bunch of lintel cracks at roof level and confirmation from the school that no one in memory had ever serviced the waterproofing to the roof or the gutters. So that was a relatively easy fix. One was a bit more intensive, like the massive crack in the outer wall of the nursery, which you can see here. Daylight was pretty easily visible through that crack. This is just inside one of the cupboards. Again, pretty nice day for a site visit. I was asked to look at some cracks to this nursery. You can see slightly here, there's a small one there, and a bigger one that comes around this corner here. So the first picture was from the inside of that cupboard. Initial thoughts were that this was some kind of foundation movement, since the corner appeared to be rotating round. And as we know, it's pretty rubbish ground, and there's trees. So there's an oak tree just to the left here, and a relatively new fruit tree just here. Archive drawings showed that this conservatory, when it was built on piles, but nothing was underpinned or changed. So we said, we suspect it's shallow brick footings, and you'll probably need to do some underpinning, and specified some remedial works for here. And the trial pits showed us that we were correct. It was pretty shallow foundations, and that so our underpinning specifications were fine. But they also showed us something new, which was we found a well directly next to the chimney of the building. And the contractor called me up and said, "Found a well. What do we do?" Wasn't in use, so it was fine. And it looked pretty good condition brickwork, actually. You can see the flank wall of the house is actually built off of the well. So we're not entirely sure what happened there, but we ended up just bridging over it. So it's still there. Anyway, this project taught me a lot of key lessons. The first is that there's no such thing as over specifying when it comes to timber, particularly when you've got exposed timber connections. Although the architects and I knew exactly what we wanted the connections to look like, we really didn't give enough detail in the tender specifications for it to be captured fully by the contractors. And that's something that I've very much learned from, and I do a lot of timber buildings now, and I know specification is key. A very real lesson, as with all existing buildings, is that record drawings can't be fully relied on. Thankfully, there wasn't really anything deal breaking on this project, but it's always good to have a reminder. And then also, time is precious on site. Things move very quickly, and you have to be agile and come up with workable solutions with the contractor as soon as possible, really. But at the end of the day, teamwork is key, not to be kitsch. Every building is the result of teamwork amongst all disciplines. We had a lot of workshops, we did a lot of sketching, and the key thing was communicating the why and the why not about all decisions, not just to the design team, but to the client. It led to a lot more productive and creative discussions around potential solutions, rather than just having a hard line and not really opening up the floor. Having these discussions on site in the head teacher's office over what was quite an excellent breakfast spread every time by the caterers. It really helped make it a fun project to be on, not just because of the food. Um, we moved on from this project to another project with IID and with the same contractor, Life Build, in Phillimore Recreation Ground. I took a lot of lessons from Manor Lodge on this one, the main one being that the timber connections were to be specified as possible. So he had various notes on all of our drawings and specifications and a full package of design intent, which carried through. And this really worked. I mean, we're very happy with the outcome. Once again, this was photographed by Andy Stagg, who did all the Manor Lodge photos. Being a job for the council, it was really important that it came in on budget and on time, and all of this extra work from both the architect and us on all of this upfront specification and going to the tender interviews and making sure that they were aware of all this additional work meant it did come in on time and pretty much on budget. So very happy with that. One interesting thing on this job actually, which also had a lot of clay and a lot of trees, was that we had this package of remedial works about 2 years prior to getting on site where they removed a bunch of the trees. And since it was low shrinkable soil, we could discount all of the additional depth that you usually have for being in the footprint of a removed tree and just go with the minimum, which saved loads of depth in our concrete and strip footings and overall carbon. So that was a nice happy story. I've kind of whizzed through. I thought I might speak a bit slower. But like I said, it's quite a small project, and it was really nice to get into the details of it and talk about it a bit more in the essay for the Nethercot. So I suppose I'll open up to questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's really lovely to see the passion you have for the project. Um, if anyone has any questions, please do put them in the webinar chat, and we will read them out. There are, or in the Q&A section as well. Thank you, Brenda. There's nothing currently, but please do add anything in there. Just to kick us off, Sarah, one of the things, as I said, that came through in your submission was the passion you had for collaboration and collaborative approaches to solving any issues that came up on site. And you talked briefly about that in lessons learned, but how do you take that development of a collaborative approach and perhaps the development of a team across contractual boundaries into other projects? What are the main things that you would suggest in the future with perhaps other contractors that you haven't worked with before or other clients?
Well, I think it's important with what we found. They're not trying to undercut you. It's often, contractors are pushed by the same things we are when it comes to fees, and making sure that all contractors are providing the same fee and being judged in the same way. So with that timber specification, with anything that you might have as a CDP element that's going to require more cost, more time, more program, making sure that everyone's on the same page about what that is really has that openness, and neither of you are trying to sneak something in or change the,
Mhm.
and you're all working to the same job. I think that's a really important honesty to have across that tender period in particular.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely vital, and in my experience, that helps you smooth over what can be a fairly abrupt contractual boundary between a consultant and a contractor. And the more humanity you put into
Mm.
that process, the more successful the relationship can be, and ultimately a successful project.
Yeah, and it was nice having the same contractor, the same architect across the two. We really got to know each other a bit better. Although there
Hmm.
were two Sarah B's, two Rick L's, two David Browns. That was a bit difficult, but yeah,
To
I think
give
if
everyone a new name, and I thought that would be a
yeah,
good.
well, the other Sarah B wrote the minutes, so I was Sarah BA. But yeah, no, it was
Good.
nice.
Um, a bit more sort of on the technical side. And we sort of glossed over the timber specification in detail. What were you using here? Solid timber from your sketches. Is it C24 or is it a particular
It's
larch product?
it's
How are you?
C16 actually,
Okay.
standard C16.
Yeah.
Because My knowledge is anything over C16 is imported from the continent, and so
Hmm.
C16 is the only really thing we can grow in the UK.
Hmm.
Specifying C16 quite often means we get a bit more rough and ready timber. So this required a lot of work on site doing the finishing up of it. So
Okay.
resanding, making sure you had nice, smooth, even lines. Um, but having that all exposed was a really nice story, and it's really nice for the kids to have a look. And whether we often specify concealed plugged finishes, I mean, maybe I'm just being an engineer. It's quite nice seeing the bolts and seeing the structure
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
the final product.
And did you specify a species, or was it just any C16?
The architect had specifications for it because there was a lot of exposed, there's birch ply
Yeah.
around. So I think we diverted to the architect specification on
Okay.
species and acceptability.
Yeah. 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 And was it presumably made predominantly prefabricated as a frame off-site and then brought into place, or were all of those elements hand cut on site?
All hand cut on site
Oh,
actually.
right. Okay.
Yeah, they had a really good chippy on site who was powering through all the cuts and making sure they're all even. This job, obviously, like I say, we learned a lot in what we should have specified for it, and it was built over the beginning of the term, and it was quite a rainy September, so there
Mhm.
was quite a lot of refinishing that was required to it.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I mean it was not. I've done some modular timber jobs, and I sometimes recommend them, sometimes don't. But when you're working with an existing building, I definitely think it wasn't the right thing to do a bunch of prefabricated
Right.
panels.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a couple of questions now coming in from the audience, which is great. Jack Laurie asks, well, he says, great presentation, Sarah, which I'd agree with. What did you find was the biggest change between tender and construction? Did the CDB connections change? Any other details of the structure?
Um, there was so we had a change from the structure where the steelwork fabricator changed technician sort of midway through the project and adjusted all of the connections that we'd previously agreed. And there were minor things like grid lines had to change to match the existing because we wanted to reuse those existing footings and we weren't quite sure where the center line of them was or how it was all laid out. But actually, I mean, you can see from the initial visuals to the final, it was
Mm,
pretty much as initially thought up by IID.
great. A question from Jesse Godinho. Just interested to know, how did you treat the timber for fire and for what duration? Was it 60, 90, 120 minutes, anything like that?
It's a single story building, and all of the structure was just holding up the roof, so it didn't actually have any specific fire requirements. It's not an
Hmm.
accessible roof; it's only for maintenance. So no, it's just exposed timber. We didn't need to plug or treat it.
It always makes a difference in
Yeah, it
terms of the
makes it a
visual
lot
finish
easier.
as well. Great. Are there any other questions from the audience for Sarah? No, doesn't seem to be coming through, but thank you very much for those questions. I've really enjoyed that, Sarah. Thank you for your time. It's really lovely to hear about smaller projects for once in a while. We often, as an industry, get sucked into the worship of the big and the colourful and the shiny. So it's nice to see small, careful, passionate work happening across the industry. Um, Really appreciate the talk. Thank you to everybody for coming to join us. And yeah, all the best for the future, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks all.